and welcome back to part 2 of Watch the Water with Brian Ardis. Some dare call it conspiracy.
I hate to sort of shit all over this theory right away, but there is a bit of a problem with it, and it boils down to the difference between poison and venom. So what is the difference between poison and venom? Well, poison are from Los Angeles. They're a hair metal band. They tend to sing about like good times. They famously did Every Rose Has a Thorn, whereas Venom, which I happen to be wearing a t-shirt right now, they're a black metal group from Newcastle, England. They play sort of a lot faster music and tend to have themes about Satan and black magic and stuff like that. So
totally different things.
Yeah, completely different things. Anywho, even though the terms poison and venom are actually sort of used interchangeably, they're not actually the same thing. They're both a toxic substance, but the difference, it lies in the way that they are delivered to the unfortunate victim. You see, poison is a toxin that gets into the body via swallowing, inhaling, or absorbing through the skin. So, you know, those toads that secrete venom that you either lick or get it on your hands or whatever, that's a poison. Poison ivy, the clue is in the name. You rub on it and you get a reaction because that's poison that you've taken into your skin. Venom is different. Venom is a specialized type of poison that has evolved for a very specific purpose. It needs to be injected via a bite or a sting, and it needs to get into your bloodstream to work, because venom is basically it's a mixture of small and large molecules that needs a wound to be able to enter the body, and to be effective, it must find its way into the bloodstream. This is where it starts to fall down, because it is theoretically possible to swallow venom and not notice any effects, right? Because venom is essentially protein. That's all it is. And so the acids in your blood will destroy that. Now, bros, bodybuilders, don't go out there and start drinking venom, right? Okay. Although it is a source of protein, just use whey powder. So notes from today: no piss in the lungs, no smoking, no drinking snake venom to get massive gains, none of that, and no praying away illnesses. Go and see a doctor. Right. Anyway, back to the script. The thing is, it could hurt you. Say if you've got like a cut in your mouth, you've got an ulcer, you've got like a small cut somewhere, then the venom could actually get into your system and get into your bloodstream. But that is the difference between venomous and poisonous. I've got a very, very good friend, and this really annoys him. He's into snakes and stuff like that. And the phrase poisonous snake really gets on his nerves, because what he says is, oh, look, a poisonous snake. Oh, I better not eat it then. And it really, really drives him mad, like the distinction between that. So this is the point. Venom needs to go into your bloodstream. Poison needs to be drank or eaten. So snake venom in the water probably wouldn't work, or certainly wouldn't be the most effective way of delivering a toxin to people. There are some sort of animals. There's one animal which is both venomous and poisonous, and this is the blue-ringed octopus. And apparently, if you eat it, you'll die from poison, and if it bites you, you'll die from envenomation. So blue-ringed octopuses are pretty nasty stuff that you don't want to muck about with. But just to give an indication, that the venom is 40 times more toxic than the poison, and that sort of tends to be the case, that venoms are worse for you because of basically how they work in your body. There are about 600 types of poisonous or venomous snakes, and between 200 and 400 people die every day due to snake bites. So it is one of these sort of major problems. Apparently, as little as 7 milliliters of royal cobra poison can kill you, and that would take about 15 minutes if bitten. The most poisonous snake that we know of that's on the land is called a taipan, and it's 180 times more deadly than cobra venom. So it's really, really nasty, this snake. One bite apparently has enough to kill 100 people, and this is native to Australia, which begs the question, why they didn't use taipan venom? Because, you know, you get more bang for your buck. Like, if you've got to dilute it, it's like squash. Like, the stronger the squash is, like, you know, the less you have to dilute it and whatnot. But
To our American listeners, they will not understand what we're talking about.
Kool-Aid. Kool-Aid is a drink that you dilute with water to give a flavour to. Apparently, the most deadly, or what's considered the most deadly snake in the world, is the saw-scaled viper. And it's not because they're particularly venomous, although they are. It's just that they tend to live in crowded areas, particularly in India, and so they kill a huge amount of people. King cobras are apparently the longest snakes. They can go up to 4 meters long. And here's something sweet. King cobras are monogamous. They mate for life.
Aww.
Who knew that? Who knew that king cobras was a symbol of enduring love and romance? It opens up all sorts of opportunities, doesn't it? Next Valentine's Day, why not get your other half of king cobra? Like, to show how dedicated you are to them. Right, I'm going to have to reiterate. We don't mean that, right? Okay, so the 5 things to take away from this show. Never mind, you get it. Anyway, but yeah, isn't that lovely? They mate for life. Although, if you are going to give one to your partner, be aware that a single bite can kill a grown male elephant. So you need to be a little bit. But, you know, love hurts. So the fastest snake on the planet is a black mamba, and apparently they can go at 12 miles per hour. Now, considering that average walking speed is between 2 and 4 miles per hour, like, you would have to run away from a black mamba. And to be quite honest, some people wouldn't make it. So if you do see one, just make sure you're with somebody that you're faster than, and then everything's okay. Apparently, the most deadly snake in the world is the Belcher sea snake, and its venom is apparently 100 times more potent than a taipan. So it's just ridiculous, this venom. But they're sea snakes, and they're actually really timid, so they're basically frightened of humans. But they can hold their breath for nearly 8 hours. So they'd be good at things like escapology and working in places like, you know, with foul smells, like maybe a pork rendering plant or something. They'd be let down by their lack of sort of opposable thumbs. But you could maybe sort of work a shift pattern out that could get the best out of them. But who knows? Now, here's the thing, right? We were talking about this earlier. Like, should you suck the venom out of a wound? We've all seen it. Like, it's in like Red Dead Redemption 2. It's in loads and loads of films. Someone gets bitten by a snake, and you've got 2 choices. You can either have the arm or the leg off, or you can try and suck the venom out and then spit it away. Now, opinion on this is divided, because obviously it's a bit of a trope, and in sort of military manuals, they tell them to do this immediately. But there's a bit of a problem with this. Basically, it's useless after the first 15 seconds. Because of the nature of the way that the blood moves around the body, after 15 seconds, it's all over. And the only thing that you can do at that point is get an anti-venom. And as we mentioned earlier, anti-venoms are taken from horses. You
might lose your sense of taste and smell as well if you suck that venom out.
Exactly, which is also not advisable.
Yeah.
There's 3 types of snake venom, and this is the thing, because he mentions kraits, he mentions rattlesnakes, he mentions cobras, and even within those delineations, there are variations of types of venom and effects and stuff like that. There's neurotoxic. That's sort of some cobras, mambas, and this blocks or overstimulates the nervous system, basically. So your eyes start to fail, you can't talk, and you can't breathe, because basically all your muscles in your lungs and your diaphragm, they're paralyzed, and so it affects the nervous system. Hemotoxic is stuff like rattlesnake venom. Now, hemotoxic impacts your blood and your heart, and it can work in one of 2 ways. It can either cause you to bleed out through internal bleeding, or it can cause blockages that basically damage cells and sort of induce like a stroke or a heart attack. And it can also, in some cases, cause necrosis, which basically means that your insides start to die and rot away. Then the final type is called cytotoxic, and this is where your body attacks itself, and essentially it liquefies all your cells as the body starts to attack itself. None of these are really much fun. Now, again, a further sort of indication that this feeding it to people through water wouldn't work is the fact that snake venom has been used throughout history as a method of hunting, like in Native America, in Africa, in places in Asia. Essentially all across the world. The second that people realized that it could be useful for hunting, they did. And they'll dip the arrows in this venom, and apparently because of the amount and because of the circulatory system of animals, it will kill the animal, but it won't poison you as you eat it. So again, this has been done since time immemorial, basically. Venom's even been used as a weapon. Very famously, Alexander the Great was in India, was met with a barrage of arrows, and his men were kind of a bit gung-ho about it. They didn't really care. Even people that were just nicked by these arrows within seconds went into massive convulsions. Their bodies went completely numb, and they started vomiting and frothing black blood from their mouths. What historians have figured out was that was actually the venom of a Russell viper, which is really, really nasty stuff, and that was used against Alexander the Great. When we're coming to drinking venom, there are actually people out there that have drank venom. There's a gentleman called Jagadish Vasudev, and he's an Indian yoga guru and spiritual teacher who goes by the name Sadhguru. I always thought the Sadhguru was Robert Smith of The Cure, but apparently, no, it's this guy. He's had a bit of a strange life. He sort of inherited a poultry farm but didn't really want to go into business, and he went to a place called Chamundi Hill, which is quite sacred in certain Hindi texts, and had a spiritual experience there, and the following year he started teaching yoga. In the 90s he set up a foundation basically trying to improve education in rural India and help the environment. So there's certainly some positive things that this foundation has done. Dodgily, he spoke at the World Economic Forum in 2007, so he's obviously Illuminati confirmed. But there are other sort of things about this bloke. He appears to be a Hindu nationalist, and he has some incredibly dodgy views about Muslims and Islam. But that's not really why we're talking about him here. He also thinks that if you eat cooked food during a lunar eclipse, you mustn't do this because it greatly depletes your pranic energy, whatever that is. He also claims to be able to solidify mercury with the power of his mind. Never actually shown anyone this, but he says that he can do it.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a really specific task.
Yeah, it is quite, isn't it? I don't know how that would work, like what use that would do. I thought of one. The only thing that I could think, you could fool people about the temperatures, right? Okay, or you could stop lighthouses from moving because they swivel on a bath of mercury. Oh dear God, what a hell! Now I say it out loud, it's terrible. Christ. Anyway. In 2011, at the Isha Yoga Center, in front of an audience of 10,000 people, he drank cobra venom, but he mixed it with milk. He was asked afterwards, like, why aren't you dead? How come you can drink this cobra venom? And what Sadhguru said was, it's venom. It's not poison. You need to understand that. Venom only affects you when it gets into your bloodstream, not your stomach. But invariably, there will be some opening somewhere, some small cut, some small ulcer, something. It will enter. I can feel it already. My eyelids are a little droopy. But venom in small doses is very intoxicating. It kind of puts you in a slumber and keeps other parts of your body alert. And then he basically sort of bangs on about how sort of snakes are sacred and that's why he thought that drinking venom was a good idea. But basically it shows that at least this one person claims to have drank venom. Have any of you ever fancied snake wine?
I've seen it. I've seen it on my travels.
Have you?
Mm.
Oh, like this. I didn't even know it existed. But basically, To be completely fair, right, there was a study done in 2015. This was done on mice. So it's not exactly the same as human beings, but it did show that when they were given cobra venom to drink, that it did actually show the same level of liver damage in these mice as if they'd been bitten and it had gone into their bloodstream. Now, there was nothing more determined from this, but there is certainly that case. There's also been cases of people getting ill and in a couple of cases nearly dying from drinking snake wine. Now, so for people that don't know what snake wine is, what you do is you get a venomous snake and you basically infuse it in a bottle of wine, like usually rice wine or something like that. And it's supposed to be a rejuvenating medicinal. It can apparently... It's a cure for baldness and it can increase sexual performance, apparently. And it's sold in places like China, Korea, Goa, Japan, Thailand, and stuff like that. What they do, there's two ways of doing it, apparently. You can either have one that's called steeped, which is a whole snake inside a bottle. And there's two ways of doing this. Either they just shove the snake in there and drown it in the wine, or, which is the more popular version, is that they knock the snake out with like a big stick. They pull its stomach out, then they throw it in the wine. And apparently taking the stomach out makes it taste and smell nicer. But what happens is when the snake wakes up, when it gets into the wine, it panics and it coils round ready to attack and then instantly dies. So it gives this really attractive, fierce looking visage of the snake, like coiled ready to jump out of the bottle and bite you. It's massively, massively cruel, obviously. But, you know, that's how they achieve it. There's another one called a mixed wine, which basically, this sounds just absolutely vile. They take the blood and the bile from the snake and they just mix it in with sake, essentially, and then feed you that, which is pretty grim. The paper was called Severe Coagulopathy After Ingestion of Snake Wine in 2015. And what happened was this 68-year-old man, he had 2 shots of this snake wine. I think he was at a wedding, if I remember rightly. And a couple of days later, he started getting really, really ill. He went to the hospital and they says, your blood's starting to coagulate. You look like you've been bitten by a snake. Have you been bitten by a snake? He says, no, but I've drank this wine. And he was given anti-venom and he actually survived. But it just shows that something's happened there where he's ingested it and somehow he's got the effects of envenoming, basically. So, but he's not the worst case of that. This is a bit... whether it's true or not is debated. But in March of this year, in the China Times, it was announced that a man in China, his son was chronically ill. It doesn't say what with, but basically he tried everything and he was pretty close to running out of ideas. So he'd got this snake wine. This snake wine had been in his pantry for over a year and nobody had touched it. He went to open it thinking, what the hell, we'll try it. We'll give a glass to my son, see if he's all right. He opened the top of the wine and the snake bit his face because apparently it was still alive. This was reported in the China Times. Like, there are some people, reputable herpetologists and scientists that have said, bollocks, that just can't happen because snakes need oxygen. The suggestion is that maybe the bottle wasn't sealed correctly and potentially the snake could have gone into what's called brumination, which is like hibernation but for snakes. Or, more likely, the story's not true. But it's a good story, so I thought we'd include that, basically.
Jack, I'm interested in you said like you've seen it on your travels. Like, have you drank it or have your friends drank it or do you know anyone? No?
I'm trying to work out exactly where I did or whether it was... Because I've been to India 3 times, but I've also had a mate telling me about all these kinds of deranged spirits and wines where they've just put dead animals in them.
Yeah.
And given them to me. I'm actually just trying to work out whether I have seen it or I'm actually just remembering someone else's story that is like kind of woven into my memory. You see, memory is not always that reliable, everybody. But I've seen some weird concoctions in India. But now that I think about it, I'm not 100% sure.
My mate's had one with a millipede in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was in Thailand he had, but I think that was. He said that was behind the bar, and it was one of these sort of whoever lost the drinking game had to have a shot of the millipede drink.
Yeah, I've seen a lot with scorpions in them. And yeah, I think any drink with a dead animal in it, I'm good.
No, thanks.
I've had a tequila worm, and that sent me absolutely loopy. It didn't stay in for very long, but that might have been due to the tequila as opposed to the actual worm. But yeah, I have done that. But there's one person who would be violently opposed to that. Well, there's not one person, but there's one person is violently opposed to that. He's also got a huge problem with Bear Grylls because of the way that Bear Grylls just happily rips the heads off snakes and drinks them and stuff like that. This is a chap called Steve Ludwin. Steve Ludwin's had a really illustrious career. He's written songs for Placebo and for the group Ash, and he actually played as second guitarist with Nirvana when they played the Reading Festival, their famous show at the Reading Festival. He roadied for Nirvana. His girlfriend wrote a book about Nirvana, and by all accounts, to say he knew those guys, which is pretty cool.
Cool, yeah.
Yeah, isn't it? But he's also fascinated with snakes, as well as sort of the music industry. His big sort of love is snakes. And he's been injecting himself with deadly venoms since 1988 in an attempt to become immune to them. This has been documented in a couple of documentaries. One is by Vice, the Vice channel. It's called Getting High, Injecting Snake Venom. Well, this guy's fascinating, basically. To give you an idea of, it didn't obviously kill him. He says it hurt like hell the first time that he injected venom. He says it's always painful and there's always some sort of swelling. But thus far, he's managed to somehow escape the sort of more deadly effects. In one time, though, he did actually go a bit too far, because in 2006, he ended up in the hospital. He describes it as an overdose of snake venom. What he'd done was he decided to mix venom from the northern Pacific rattlesnake, from the eyelash viper, and from the green tree viper, and he decided to inject all three into his hand. Yeah.
Ooh.
And basically he turned up at the hospital and they were like, what's happened? He says, I've been bit by a snake. And he says, well, what snake? And he says, all right, I'll come clean. It's 3 snakes. I've injected myself with the venom of 3 snakes. To which they said, well, you're definitely going to die. There's nothing we can do about that. We could perhaps fight one of them, but 3 of them, no, you're dead, mate. We're very, very sorry. Bizarrely, he stayed in the hospital for 3 days, got bored, discharged himself, got better. And since then, he's been doing things like he's mixed black mamba, king cobra, puff adder venom all together and injected it into his arm and still survived. Now, this sounds just insane, and it may well be, but there is a purpose for it. What he's concerned about is, remember we were saying that basically in order to get antivenoms, you need to get them from horses, and that basically sometimes the horses die. Worse than that, it's not very effective a lot of the time because it's gone through an animal system. It's not uncommon for people to reject antivenom when they get it. Their body just simply rejects it. It's not for me. It's not conducive with me. So you're buggered, because that's literally the only cure if you've been bitten. So from his blood, what they're hoping to do, where was it? I think it's in Sweden. They're using his blood to develop human antivenoms, which is just incredible because it means that they'll be far more effective, lets people be less likely to reject it, and also it just removes the cruel element for using horses, because, as I say, this is just really, really archaic. When he started, he basically was doing it monthly. Then he went to weekly. Now he daily injects himself with venom. Although by 2019, he'd knocked it back to sort of once a fortnight. But apparently it took him 4 to 5 years, about just under 5 years, before he started to notice a difference. Before that, it just took him ages to get better after each one. And after nearly 5 years of doing this to himself, he started to notice that he was getting better a lot quicker.
I remember there being a weird fountain of youth aspect to that whole thing, and he looked really youthful, which was kind of for his age.
Yeah, what he says is that Venom appears to sort of give him sort of anti-aging properties. Very, very sort of like taut skin, looks young, still got all his hair, etc., etc., etc. And he started developing like a sort of Venom moisturizer cream, and he swears by it. He absolutely swears by it, basically. But he's tried all sorts of things. He like one of the first things he did before he started injecting it was he tried gargling rattlesnake venom. This was when he was on tour with Nirvana, I believe. He gargled rattlesnake venom to try and get rid of a sore throat. And again, to further prove the point, he's another person that drinks venom. On this particular documentary, he gets cobra venom a couple of times. He says, this is enough to kill a person, puts it in his mouth and drinks it. And then he does the explanation that it's just protein. It'll be broken down by your stomach acid. It doesn't work like that. It needs to get into the bloodstream. Now, strangely, Steve Ludwig wasn't actually the first person to do this. It was a chap called Bill Haast. He was a pioneer in extracting venom from snakes, and also basically he was a proponent of self-immunization. He holds the world record, this Bill Haast, of being bitten 172 times by deadly snakes. So, anybody that was going for that record, that's the benchmark that you've got to hit. So, dedication. That's what Roy Castle said. You've got to crack on with it. Apparently, when he was 11, he was bit by a rattlesnake. He barely felt any effects. So it's one of these things where potentially he's got some sort of like natural immunity. Apparently, in the same year, he was bitten by a copperhead, and he spent a week in hospital. But people often die from being bitten by a copperhead. So very, very lucky. And then he became started extracting venom to be used in anti-venoms at the age of 15. And what he did was he actually opened up like a reptile zoo place where he would catch the snakes and get the venom out in front of like a paying audience, and then obviously that venom would be taken and used to make anti-venoms. In the 1950s alone, in that one decade, he was bitten by cobras 20 times and survived. In fact, he actually survived until the age of 101, and right up until his last, up to 4 years prior to his death, he was still injecting snake venom, apparently on a weekly or daily basis. And again, in 1949, he was helping the University of Miami with medicines that were actually very effective for treating polio that were derived from snake venoms. And again, this just shows you that, for example, when artists is saying like, "Oh, this is derived from this and this is derived from this," it's like, well, yeah, there's only so many things in nature that you can derive stuff from. Venoms and plants and stuff like that. That's where you get stuff from, basically. But his work on polio was sort of dropped because at that time the polio vaccine was developed, and so it was felt that there was no real need. But apparently his work showed really real improvements. People that were very, very ill from polio were seen to make near miraculous recoveries due to the intervention of his snake venom.
Hello, this is Dr. Vicky Mail, and I'm a reproductive immunologist. Although our hosts may be charming, please be aware that they're not medical professionals. If you're unsure about the COVID-19 vaccination, you can look up advice from your local healthcare authorities or have a chat with your doctor or midwife. You can also follow me on Twitter @VickyLovesFacts for the evidence about the COVID-19 vaccination, fertility, pregnancy, and breastfeeding.
So, back to our main guy. So, Brian Ardis. Now, I've had a bit of a dig around for him, and this guy's been sort of like floating around for a long time, but he's only sort of recently got into like the sort of conspiracy milieu or the level at it. He's always kind of dabbled at it. Like, I found his old LinkedIn page, I found his old YouTube site, I found his old Twitter handle. So I've properly stalked this guy, like in a very sinister way. Anywho, his life started at the Porter College of Chiropractic from 2001 to 2004. That's where he got his qualifications. Now, according to his YouTube channel, he actually got into medicine to help his sister. His lifelong plan and one was to help his sister who's got a disease called lupus. And so he was determined to study medicine, become a medical doctor, and search for some cure to help his sister. But very soon he bollocks that off because, sod her, and decided instead to do zoology at Brigham Young University. Now, Brigham Young University is actually a Mormon university. There's no sex, no drugs, no relationships, no booze allowed on campus. It's boring by the sounds of it. There's also a bit of an honor code to act Mormon on this place, even if you're not. So I don't know whether he is a Mormon or whether he's a Christian, but he certainly went to this Mormon university. Now, this is not really with this Mormon university. Can you believe a fundamentalist religious organization has a few potential problems? For example, not desperately keen on LGBT people. Some of you more old school Mormons aren't necessarily that keen on people of colour due to Joseph Smith's explanation that people of colour were marked that way to show their alignment with Satan. Things like that. And they also have a bit of a problem with rape on campus, and because of the culture, they don't tend to tattle on people, and so there's been cases where girls have been raped, and rather than being dealt with properly, they've been hounded out of the school because they don't want to transgress the honor code, do they? Rape. That's not transgressing the honor code. Telling people about that rape. See, it's a fine line, isn't it? But anywho, apparently, again.
Just full disclosure, this is how good at research our Neil is. He even went to watch Book of Mormon just 2 days ago for this show.
Absolutely. Yes, I did. Yes, exactly for the show. I knew 3 years ago when I booked this, that it would be handy. It would be absolutely handy to go and see that. If any, I would go and see it. I'd recommend it. It's absolutely hilarious. Please, everyone, go and see the Book of Mormon. So, again, he was going to actually study medicine, but for some reason he's doing zoology under a sort of biology degree. And then he decides he wants to knock medicine on the head for two reasons. One, because all his colleagues get right on his fucking nerves, apparently. And two, because he has a baby, and he's constantly crying. He's got something wrong with it. They can't figure it out. They try all sorts of remedies. Nothing works. Eventually, he bumps into a bloke who's a chiropractor. And this chiropractor apparently does an adjustment on this baby. And within hours, this baby settled down. And he claims that something was pinching something in his neck. This is a bit controversial. There are some people who would swear by chiropractors for small children. There are some people who would recommend that nobody goes to chiropractors. There's definitely been cases of people being hurt by chiropractors, broken necks, all sorts of things like muscular injuries and all sorts. But as I will reiterate, chiropractors pretty much saved my life. And were able to find out exactly what was wrong with me, what my spine was doing wrong, what triggered it, and give adequate help to sort that out. So it's a bit of a sort of a grey area, but seeing this, he's convinced by chiropractic, and so becomes a chiropractor instead. Now, as soon as he finishes his degree, he opens the Artist Healing Centre of the Smokies, is what it's called. And this runs from 2004 to 2009. In 2008, however, he faces disciplinary actions for failing to keep up with continuing education. Now, this happens in all sorts. I used to be a hypnotherapist, and in a lot of these sort of what would be considered alternative therapies and stuff like that, what you're supposed to do is continuously learn and keep a track of, audit what you're learning. And someone can just phone you up out the blue and say, you need to show me all you're learning for the past few years. I think what's happened with artists is he's gone, shit, I haven't done any of that. And basically, so he's faced disciplinary action. And that very same year, he decides just to retire as a chiropractor and opens what he calls the Artist Healing Centre, which he runs for another 8 years until 2018 when he sells it, and it's now owned by someone called the North Texas Healing Center. In 2010, he suddenly arrives on Twitter, and he also sets up a website called Artist Nutrition, which is now defunct, and sets up a YouTube channel. And on this YouTube channel, he's talking about the usual shit. Aluminium poisoning from vaccines. He's offering like detox programs when detoxing isn't a thing. You know how you detox? By having a working kidneys and a liver. All this drawing crap out of your ears and your feet and stuff like that. It's nonsense. It's just not a thing. You have a detox system. It's your renal system, essentially. He offers to identify previously missed blood infections. He's got this sort of obsession about scar tissue that could be caused by pregnancy or gallbladder infections or C-sections. He's got a particular sort of like thing about perineal scars. He seems obsessed with this. Well, not obsessed, but he mentions it at least a couple of times because I've remembered it. The scar that would be between the lady part and the back part that sometimes tears while giving birth. He seems very interested in this part of people for some reason. But he thinks that this is like the cause of chronic fatigue syndrome. He's doing things like seminars on female hormones and depression and nutrition. You know, all the sort of stuff that as a chiropractor or as a retired chiropractor, he would know absolutely nothing about. Like, and he's doing it with some sort of degree of authority as well. And what's interesting to watch is that basically he starts off doing these seminars for money, and then as his YouTube videos progress, they all become free. I assume because no sod turns up to them, basically. Now, in 2010, so he sort of sods off Ardis Nutrition, sods off his YouTube channel, which he's just started, and he starts a business called Ardis Labs. And at some point, he develops an acne treatment. Now, this acne treatment costs $100 for a month worth of tablets. And these tablets are basically made from plants and essential oils. Now, on the website, it says, under his product page, these statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent disease. So he's selling unregulated products. Now, in 2020, he claims that his father-in-law died due to hospital protocols, and this basically put him on the track to realizing that COVID was a scam, and that he realized that the anti-vaxxers were right, and that he really needed to sort of spread the news about this. By sheer coincidence, he also happens to sell on his website something called a natural immune health cocktail. And it is a mere $119 for some tablets. And again, it reiterates that the product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent disease, but he infers very strongly that it will protect you from COVID. Whether that is in any way connected to his sudden sort of like, introduction to the anti-COVID scene or something like that, one could only speculate, but it does seem to be a little bit of a coincidence, doesn't it? Let's crack on. So, the first time that we saw him was obviously on Owen Schroyer, and the big thing that he says straight away is that if anybody tells you that Invectamin is not FDA approved, then show them this document. And the document is called Table 2E, Characteristics of Antiviral Agents that are approved or under evaluation for the treatment of COVID-19. Can anybody spot the mistake that Brian Ardis has made? Yes, that's right. Let's read that title again. Characteristics of antiviral agents that are approved or under evaluation for the treatment of COVID. And if you go into the document, Invectamin's under a clinical trial. It's not been approved. In fact, the very document that he says that it isn't approved by the FDA and that it is currently going through trials, but no trial has found it to be beneficial. I have a funny Invectamin story, and by sheer coincidence, I didn't even realise this. Jay Widener of Kubrick Moon fame, I'm friends with him on Facebook. I'd not made that connection. Now, he's one of these people that isn't particularly into COVID. He thinks it's all a big sham. He was a big proponent of hydroxychloroquine, but he was mostly a proponent of Invectamin. Now, Vectamin is an anti-parasitical drug. You can get it over the counter in various places to treat parasites. Why were people calling it a horse dewormer? Well, because in larger doses, it's used to treat parasites, worms, in horses. And when people were going to their doctors and saying, I want Invectamin, they were saying, well, what for? COVID. Well, we can't prescribe it you for that. So people would go and get the veterinary grade Invectamin rather than the prescribed stuff. So when Joe Rogan's saying CNN said I was eating horseworm and stuff like that, say, well, you got yours prescribed from Pierre Corey, who's a dodgy doctor. Most people couldn't get it prescribed, so they were actually having horse dewormer. Now, Jay, bless his soul, not only had he bought this horsewormer en masse and was reselling it to members of the public in order to help them, he'd also worked out that the fractions, like, well, if this is horse stuff and it's a bit stronger, this is the dose that we'll need. He was taking this as a preventative, and he put up a warning on his Facebook. He said, after 5 or 6 days of taking Invectamin, I had to rush to the toilet, where I purged my body of what I can only describe as gallons and gallons of black tar-like oil. Now, what that is, okay?
Satan?
He's got a better idea. He's clocked it. He reckons that it's archons. He thinks that archons, which are the fictional and mysterious alien pan-dimensional entities that sit even above the throne of Lucifer in the Illuminati pyramid, controlling things from behind the scenes, he thinks that they might be parasites, and so the Invectamin emptied those parasites from his stomach. Now, what a doctor will tell you is that what he's done there is he's shredded the internal lining of his stomach away to the point where he's bleeding internally.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah. And he wasn't the only one who I saw this problem. I saw on my Facebook timeline loads of people saying, well, I've got to day 6 and the oil's started. And, how long does this last for?
Wow. I hadn't heard that.
Yeah. And even at the time, I thought, that's not a sensible thing to do, is it? But yeah. And I think he's better now, obviously. But
Stopped posting on Facebook.
ridiculous, isn't it?
I just like surprised he's got to go into some gobbledygook about the archons being like a parasite now. It's like they're like spiritual entities. They're not real manifestations on Earth, for God's sake.
Well, the Occam's razor sort of explanation would be, that stuff that you've been taking that's known to cause stomach upsets that you've been taking in massive quantities that are meant for animals, not humans. Maybe that's like giving you a bit of a dicky tummy. But no, it's not that. It's not that. It's something to do with these pan-dimensional beings being in his stomach. What they were doing in his stomach in the first place, who can say? But they're not there anymore. So anyway, yeah. He then goes on to say, and a lot of this will get repeated because he uses the same shit over and over again. He talks about this Ebola virus study, and he says that in this Ebola virus study that the remdesivir killed 50%, or actually 54% of all the Africans that they gave it to. Right. This is from the paper itself. We'll come on to the paper a bit more to explain what it is. But it says, and you must remember that what they're doing with this remdesivir is they're trialling it as a treatment for Ebola. And what they found was it's not effective as a treatment for Ebola, that it just didn't work. So they stopped using it in the study and used different things. But what the study did show, which is why Anthony Fauci linked to this Ebola study, was that basically remdesivir was safe. He also linked it to various other studies that showed a reduction in COVID symptoms and no heightened heart, kidney, or anything like that problems against the placebo group. It says in this paper, one patient in the remdesivir group had hypertension that resulted in cessation of the loading dose of remdesivir, and that was followed by cardiac arrest. However, even in this case, the death could not be readily distinguished from the underlying fulfillment of Ebola itself. So basically, it's not that the remdesivir has killed these people, it's that it hasn't saved them from Ebola. Ebola has a 50% death rate anyway. So in that group, 54% of the people who took remdesivir died. So it's not indicative that remdesivir is bad. It's just indicative that it's not effective as an Ebola treatment.
Yeah.
He mentions the Gilead study, which is also known as the cohort study. And he says that 23% of them, and there's 53 people in this study, experienced organ failure, acute kidney failure, hypertension, and septic shock. No, they didn't. He's lying. He's just lying. What the paper actually said was that the overall mortality rate in this cohort study was 13%. The mortality rate was higher in the subgroup of patients on invasive ventilation compared with patients on non-invasive oxygen support. Factors associated with increased risk of mortality included an age greater than 70 and higher baseline serum creatinine levels indicating reduced kidney function. So these 53 people are all people who are nearly 70 or over 70 who've got pre-existing kidney problems who are in hospital with COVID right at the beginning of the pandemic when we don't understand what it is. But, but even still, he's actually lied. When he said 23% of all of them experienced organ failure, where he's got the 23% from is this. Mild to moderate liver enzyme elevations in 23% were observed in this cohort. No new safety signals were detected during short-term remdesivir therapy. So what basically he said is that in 23% of them, they've got something that's indicating there's something wrong with their kidneys. It didn't cause kidney failure. And this was present before they came to the hospital and started the medicine.
Yeah.
So all of these people, right, had been to get on this cohort study, they had to have been severely ill for 12 days before they were allowed on the study, before any treatment started. 75% of the people in them had comorbidities, including hypertension, diabetes, hyperlipidemia, and asthma. So these are very old, very ill people, and it still doesn't show the deaths that he claims. He's just pulled it out of his arse like Jay Widener's Archons. Like, it's just ridiculous. He says that another 8% had to be taken off the drug before day 10 because they experienced such acute kidney failure and liver failure that they were going to die. Again, this isn't true. 4 patients discontinued remdesivir prematurely. 1 due to worsening of pre-existing renal failure, that's kidney failure, and 1 due to multiple organ failure, and 2 due to elevated liver enzymes. Not due to the medicine, due to the disease. This was shown before they started the treatment, and they said that it's just not safe to do it to these people, so they stopped them. There's nothing improper about this paper or these protocols at all. Okay, he then talks about the remdesivir. It says that this study, the French study on remdesivir, of which 5 people, 2 needed kidney transplants. Yeah, they did. But these people, again, were people who got a pre-existing kidney problem and were severely ill with COVID. Before the study started, 2 were on ventilation, 1 was all oxygen, and all of them were considered critically ill before the trial started. All of them were going to die. 3 survived. 3 survived of the 5. So the majority survived in this study that he's claiming shows that remdesivir is a killer. And it doesn't. It just simply doesn't. He then mentions the WHO study, which is remdesivir and acute renal failure, a potential safety signal from disproportionate analysis of the WHO database. And he says that acute renal failure with remdesivir is 20-fold to all comparative drugs. That's just nonsense. You just made that up because the paper itself doesn't make any such claim. Right? The study is a bit of a weird study. It's not looking at medical records and determining causal causation. It's a word study, by which I mean they've actively searched for the phraseology. They've looked at renal failure and remdesivir, and they've basically thrown those 2 into the Word document or whatever and shown how many times it comes up. And from that, they've inferred, there's a bit of a correlation with renal failure and remdesivir. The reason for this is because remdesivir is the treatment for COVID, and COVID causes renal failure. Like, this is the point. Now, in all fairness, the WHO did have a problem with it, and other people had a problem with remdesivir. And then basically what they did was they did a whole series of studies that showed that it was actually safe, and that they needn't worry about it anymore. If we're being completely honest, and that's what we aim to do here, remdesivir isn't actually a brilliant medicine. The Lancet says of remdesivir has no significant effects on patients with COVID-19 who are already being ventilated. Among other hospitalized patients, it has a small effect against death or progression to ventilation, or both. And that's in the Lancet from 2022. So it's not the best medicine, and it has to be used at a certain time. Otherwise, it is essentially not effective at all. But it is one thing that we have in our arsenal of weapons to treat COVID. And you've got to remember at the time, basically, that they were desperate for anything.
Yeah.
But the fundamental and important thing is that it doesn't kill you. It just doesn't kill you. All of the stuff that this has been debunked by numerous various studies. Say Dr. John Mellors, who's the chief of the Division of Infectious Diseases of Pittsburgh Medical Center, has done studies on remdesivir, says that patients who got remdesivir in trials showed no evidence of kidney damage compared to the group that didn't get the drug. And even before you put onto it, you must undergo kidney and liver tests to make sure that this medicine is safe for you, because all medicines have got some sort of potential harm. My mum's desperately allergic to penicillin, but that doesn't mean that other people shouldn't have penicillin. It says that the lung or kidney side effects that were described were complications of critical COVID. We did a study and examined remdesivir in a blind way by using placebo controls and randomization. These side effects simply did not occur. Basically, when he said that things like it causes complete liver and kidney shutdown, it's like this isn't true. None of this is in any of the studies that he's actually talking about. The one that's closest is the one that we'll come on to in Watch the Water, which is actually about Ebola rather than COVID. He then goes on to say that obviously as your kidneys shut down, the pneumonia is actually urine filling your lungs. And I think we can all remember the old song, "The piss bone's connected to the lung bone." Can we not? No. You know why? Because that's not a fucking thing, is it? That's not a thing. What a stupid thing to say. I don't know why he said that. I think he just got carried away with it, because he then basically says that it's not pneumonia, it's a pulmonary edema, and basically they're fundamentally mistreating people. Now, my understanding of a pulmonary edema is like an internal bleed in the pulmonary system, which is your breathing system. But here's the thing about this. I know nothing of it, but with my limited sort of it seems to show that pulmonary edema is also associated with your heart stopping or problems with your heart. It seems to me that people who know about these things probably might be able to detect and indeed know about these things more than a retired chiropractor. And where he gets the balls to suggest that all these people are getting it wrong, and he's spotted something that he's never dealt with, never seen up close, never even had an association with, does seem to be taking his credentials as a doctor a pinch too far as I'm concerned. So I don't believe that. I think he's just made that up. Now, the next thing that he said, bizarrely, is true. He says that 95 to 99% of all COVID deaths occur in ICUs. Kind of. But do you want to know why? It's because of a thing called the IO7 codes, which is how we record COVID death. As soon as COVID came out as a novel disease, there were two codes that are delineated for it to be put on death certificates that show what the death was caused by. An IO7-1 and an IO7-2. IO7-2 is suspected COVID. We suspect that COVID was involved in that, but we can't prove it because this person didn't have a test. Or they had a test, but didn't die they died at home. An IO7-1 is died with a positive COVID test in a hospital or care home setting. So in order to be put on the IO7-1, you have to die in a hospital or a care home. If you died at home, you wouldn't be added to the stats. And that in itself completely blows the theory that governments across the world were trying to inflate the COVID figures. Actually, what they were doing was they were decreasing the COVID death numbers, because in order to be added to that IO71 code, you had to meet specific criteria. If you didn't have a test, or if you died somewhere else, you were not added to that list. And although throughout the entire pandemic, everyone was saying they're hyping up the deaths, they're saying that anybody who died of anything is added to the COVID lists, that's simply not true. I'll take it a step further. The IO71 that died in a hospital or care home setting with a test, which is the very number that is used by the news media, the UK government, and the American number to show the level of mortality from COVID, of the three reporting methodologies, that's the lowest. That's the lowest. The second highest is suspected, because, as you say, we suspect we can add anyone onto it. Do you know what the highest metric of recording COVID deaths is? There's a third one, where after that they look at the death certificates, and an organisation like in the UK, it's the Office of National Statistics, they review all the deaths. And not just excess, they review it through the death certificates to see if the COVID was a causative effect. And so the third metric is people who've died with COVID on their death certificate, where if they hadn't have had COVID, they wouldn't have died. And that is the highest number. And that's the one that they don't tell you.
Yep. That was going to be my question. Yeah.
Yeah, so again, all of these people are basically saying that, they're hyping up the COVID figures. No, they're not. They're doing the exact opposite.
Jack, do you know how this compares to how they do it in Australia?
I'm not actually sure about in Australia, but I do remember there was a lot of stuff coming out, because I've got quite a few friends on the other side of the fence with the whole COVID thing. So I've gone through this debate many times, but there was a lot of cases where they were counting people who had died for something without COVID, but they were COVID positive, so it wasn't the cause of death. But that was perfect clarification there, Neil, because I'd always hadn't really got a proper answer on that. And this is the case of when everyone starts trying to play scientist, isn't it? without really knowing the...
To be fair, there have been a few statements that might have been a bit confusing for people. For example, like Deborah Birx of the CDC said that we're counting everybody. We're counting everybody that as a COVID death, and she was telling the truth. But that's the IO72 code, and there's a very good reason to speculate that more people have died of it in the initial phases than have, and that's to track the disease. Because basically, all right, Jane here, she's died of something, and we suspect it's COVID, right? Okay, but we haven't had a test, so we can't confirm it. We can't add it to the IO71, but all the indications are that she has. So we'll mark that down, because that could give us all sorts of other data about the types of people who catch it, the types of people who die from it, how it's spreading, what cities it's in, whether she had any pre-existing conditions that made it more likely that she was going to die. So all of this data is useful in different ways. What's happened is that people have tended to jump on one statement like that and gone, see. And then there have been cases as well, like there was that chap that got killed in a motorbike accident that was added to the COVID list. What they don't tell you is very shortly afterwards he was taken off it. And also, are there going to be some cases where, say, people who are terminally ill have caught COVID and died, and it's literally a mashup between, did the COVID kill her or not? Because she was going to die in 2 weeks' time anyway. There's always stuff like that. But what people don't tend to realise is that there's huge amounts of compliance and regulatory systems that go into monitoring this. Places like the Office of National Statistics, and people will say to me, yes, Neil, but the Office of National Statistics is a government or a non-governmental organisation, so they're in on the plot, aren't they? They'll be saying exactly what the government wants to tell them. Well, if that's the case, how come the ONS tells the exact opposite story to the government? The ONS figures show the government to have done really, really bad. Like the people who are telling them that they did really, really well are people like the Telegraph, the newspapers. Like recently, we've had Rishi Sunak in the Telegraph saying, "Oh, lockdowns were a bad idea." That's because the bloke from the Telegraph works for the oil industry, and he doesn't want to have another lockdown. Because when lockdowns happen, oil goes into negative because we don't fly on planes, we don't go to work, we don't use buses, we don't use cars, we don't use heating in offices and stuff like that. For the first time in history, oil went into negative equity, which meant that you had to pay people to take it off your hands due to the lessening of travel. So the people who've got a vested interest in downplaying COVID and pretending that it was all hypes and it was all nonsense and rewriting history are two people. One, the government, because it makes them look better. And two, the government's donors. Why? Because it saves them a shed load of money. And it's as simple as that. So I'm ever so sorry to say it, but anybody that's jumped on this COVID denial train, what you're actually doing is you're giving the government an alibi. You've fallen right into their trap. They had two sets of scientists at the beginning, sage, which were right, and then idiots like Carl Hennigan and Sunita Gupta and stuff like that were pushing Carol Sikora, Michael Yeadon, Anders Tegnell, all of whom are financed by donors to the Tory party, all of whom were pushing the herd immunity. Why did they want to go for herd immunity? Simply because it saves the donors money and it saves the government money. It's as simple as that. And if people can't see that narrative because they don't like lockdowns and being told what to do, see, this is why you keep continuously being tricked, because you're being gamed. We know how to push your buttons, and so we're going to push your buttons. And that's how people can be tricked into really, really silly positions, basically. Mm-hmm. So the final thing that Ardis says is that doctors get paid to say that people have COVID or to put them on ventilators and stuff like that. And again, this simply isn't true. What this is about is that the system of healthcare in America is privatized, which means that basically everything costs you money. So that money is not going into a profit margin. That money is being used to pay the insurance companies for the medicine and or equipment and or time that is being used. Is it a great system? No, it's not a great system, but it is not the way that they're describing it. There is no financial incentive for somebody to pretend that somebody has COVID. In fact, if anything, saying that somebody's got COVID is massively detrimental to the hospital, because it means that you have to have an exclusion zone around that person because of the contagious nature of the disease. So in pure real estate terms, COVID is actually really detrimental, even for an insurance-based system. So just nonsense, absolute nonsense. Now, when he appears at the panel with Doug Mastriano, the QAnon Confederate gear bloke, it right from the start, there's something really cagey, because he says, "Welcome, Dr. Brian Ardis. He's treated more than 10,000 patients." Yeah, as a chiropractor, not as anything to do with COVID, although that's what you're heavily trying to imply with this. And then he basically goes to, I wanted to know the Medicare age patients. What's the percentage of deaths of those that received remdesivir for 5 days? It was 26.9% of them died. And again, that's one of these things where it kind of sounds scary until you go, right, so over 70% of them survived. And these are people who are so ill that they require remdesivir. That doesn't give an indication that that's what's killed them. It gives an indication that the remdesivir didn't save 26% of them, and that's it. And he knows this. It's just nonsense.
That's the way they frame it, though, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. This is entirely his grift. He gish gallops and he cherry picks. And, it's the Monet thing, like we've discussed before. Like, from a distance, it looks like this is actually a coherent picture. Get right close up to it. It's just a load of dots. It's just a load of dots. They're not connected at all. Might give that vague impression, but they really aren't. He then talks about saying that remdesivir is known to be cardiotoxic, and he quotes the paper "Potential Cardiotoxic Effects of Remdesivir on Cardiovascular Systems." Now, I read this paper, and it doesn't say that at all. It says that the theory is that basically remdesivir can cause problems in people who already have heart problems. So these people need to be monitored more carefully if they use remdesivir. But if you're in the hospital with a pre-existing heart condition and you've been hospitalized with COVID, you're in a bad way. You're in a really bad way anyway. And so to basically blame it on the medicine is specious at best, basically. he then basically says about the Gilead study again, saying that basically, the one that had 53 people, they found that it caused multiple organ failure and acute kidney failure, septic shock in 30% of people that they gave it to. No, he didn't. So we've already covered that. He's just simply made that up. He's completely misrepresented that, and he's lied about what's in the actual paper. So yeah, it's just nonsense. All this multiple people needed kidney transplants. No, that didn't happen at all. One of them did, but they had problems with their kidneys before, and they survived. So, it's really, really just nonsense. Right, so then Brian Ardis gets in the car and goes to see Stu Peters. Now, Stu Peters has gone through a few sort of iterations of his life. Do you like hip-hop, Jack?
Love it. Big fan.
Do you? Who's your favourite hip-hop artists?
I was always really into Tupac and NWA, all the old, Dr. Dre, love Eminem. Big fan of Ocean Wisdom as well. A lot of the English hip hop is just sounds good, huh? Such a good accent.
Oh, nice. Yeah, it can be. Low Key's a particularly good English rapper. Very, very skilled. I like Big Pun. I like Mobb Deep. Nas, all the sort of East Coast stuff. I really like Jedi Mind Tricks and a guy called R.A. the Rugged Man.
Yeah.
You know what I found out, Brent, about Raucous Records the other day? Do you know who started Raucous, or whose money started Raucous Records?
No.
James Murdoch, son of Rupert Murdoch.
No way.
Yeah, I was gutted too. He didn't actually run it. It was his mate apparently that started Raucous. Like Raucous, for people that don't know, is it's where Mos Def and Talib Kweli, Eminem and R.A. the Rugged Man and various other people, Company Flow and other acts like that got their start. It's an independent New York-based record label, I believe, and it's the famous sort of releases that he's done are called Sound Bombing. Eminem did a song called Any Man that was on Sound Bombing too, and that was sort of one of the first things that got him sort of noticed. But yeah, it was started with money from James Murdoch. Yeah, but yeah, I also like things like I like Onyx, I like CNN, the rap group, not the news organization. Dilated Peoples are really, really great.
They're great.
Yeah. Now, obviously, as we know, the five greatest rappers of all time are Dylan, 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 and Dylan, because he spits that hot shit. But you can add another name to that list now. Have you heard of Focus? It's Stu Peters. Let's just cut to the chase. It's Stu Peters. Stu Peters used to be a rapper called Focus. And obviously, music is subjective, but I like to think of myself as a fan of hip-hop, and I can quite happily say it's awful stuff, just dreadful.
It's not good.
Oh, it's terrible. It's really, really bad. Like, he's got no flow. He does that rhyme structure where it's like the Machine Gun Kelly thing, where it's literally the end word on the sentence is the only thing that rhymes. There's one bit in one song where he starts a flow for a bit and then sort of seems embarrassed that he's doing it, so he stops. And in one of the videos, he keeps cutting back to this studio full of really hard-looking black guys in the sort of most obvious way to give himself some sort of credibility and legitimacy that I've ever seen in my entire life. It's literally like, look at me with black people, see, I know the hip-hop. And it's like, mate.
And he's got this crappy little mohawk as well.
Yeah, the mohawk was...
Oh, God, yes.
While he's in the studio with these guys.
Well, he's doing Taxi Driver, isn't he? Like, he's sort of, he's inferring that he's Travis Bickle. And there's a brilliant bit in this video where he's driving along, and he's obviously driving in real traffic, and so he keeps sort of looking to the camera, which is on his right shoulder, but then desperately like switching back so that he doesn't hit traffic in front of him, and he just looks twitchy and awkward like Alan Partridge. Like he looks like he's trying to, he looks like, you know, when you're in the gym and you see some guy blatantly trying to look at some girl's arse but not get caught, he looks a bit like that. Like he doesn't come across quite as cool as it is. Well, he can't decide whether he's sensitive or whether he's street either, can he? Like, so he kind of sort of tries to sort of like...
Well, there's Tupac in it.
Well, yeah, I suppose, yeah.
Come on, it's every good rapper.
Well, I mean, you're allowed to sort of, you know, have a palate. Like, you don't have to always be things. But the one thing I would reiterate was do it well, eh? Or at least don't do it really, really badly. That would be my advice. But anyway, Stu Peters knocked that on the head after a while, and then he got sort of famous as being a bounty hunter, and he set up a sort of YouTube channel. Yeah, no, online. He set up a YouTube channel, and by all accounts, he was trying to do the sort of Steven Seagal come Dog the Bounty Hunter thing. But he got kind of into trouble doing this because he dressed up as a policeman. In fact, his uniform and the cars that they were using was so like police cars that people inferred that he was the police. So he'd roll up and give the impression that it was either the police or the FBI in order to catch suspects, which is illegal. It was so egregious with this that they actually changed the law in that particular state so that people had to dress more differently than law enforcers because essentially he was impersonating a police officer. He's also got sort of certain problems, like, say, domestic problems, shall we say, run-ins with the law. 1 a.m. on February the 19th, Stuart Peters' wife called the police in Red Wing, Minnesota, claiming that Peters was in a drunken rage after getting home from his bowling league. In an angry scramble to find his phone, according to the account from Peters' wife recorded in the police report, he had allegedly started to berate her and thrown household items, including boots and pillows, at her. Arriving on the scene, police officers found Peters, who appeared to be intoxicated. His wife showed officers videos that she had recorded of her husband yelling at her, throwing objects around, and according to the report, asked whether she was concerned that Peters would attack her. She said, "Yes, that's the reason that I called you guys." His wife told officers that her husband regularly became belligerently drunk, saying that incidents like the one they were reported that night were, in the words of one officer, happening far too frequently. According to the report, his wife said that she would normally lay low and wait until Peters passed out from drink, saying that she was afraid to call the police and that she told the police that on a recent trip to Florida, Peters had grown furious because he couldn't find his wallet, so he took her wallet and her ID and left her at the home. So, don't quite understand that. She said, "I don't know what he's capable of doing when he's drinking." Peters apparently gave shifting explanations to the police as to how he'd gotten so drunk, also as to how the altercation began. One statement was, "Hey, I know how this goes. So I'm the guy that goes bowling and gets drunk. I come home and the wife is pissed off with me that I'm drunk." But this wasn't his first encounter with the police. He was also convicted of theft for stealing stereo equipment when he was a teenager. And he was also arrested in Florida in 2006 for falsely impersonating a police officer for unlawful use of an illegal blue light and robbery of less than $300 whilst using a weapon. So what he's done there is he's pulled somebody over pretending to be a police officer in a car that looks like a police car with a blue light and siren, and I think what he did was he told this person, "Traffic ticket, but I'll let you off if you give me $300.
Wow. Oh my God.
So yeah, I may be wrong about that, but I think that's what happened in that one. The worst thing that happened, though, was that basically he had to give up the bounty hunting work because, well, aside from the fact that his police-like uniform inspired a change to Minnesota law in 2015, restricting how much bounty hunters could dress like law enforcement, and the provision supporters said that this was, and I quote, explicitly aimed at Peters, saying his clothes and cars were reminiscent of a police cruiser, and he had repeatedly misled defendants about whether they were being arrested by the police or a bounty hunter. Goodhue County Sheriff Scott McNerlin complained to the Associated Press that Stu Peters was publicity hungry and seemed out to compete with celebrity bail bondsman Dog the Bounty Hunter. So, he started a YouTube channel basically showing him as a sort of Dog the Bounty Hunter figure. But unfortunately, it kind of went wrong in 2017. What happened was he sent 2 employees of his bounty hunting firm to locate this suspect who was wanted on charges of DUI, assaulting a police officer, and possession of cocaine. He was working in a car dealership. And so these 2 people went up to the car dealership. A shootout occurred during which the suspect and both bounty hunters were killed on the scene. Now, a person that worked in the car dealership who was on the scene at the time said that the bounty hunters had falsely identified themselves as FBI agents before the shootout.
Far out. Wow.
Isn't it? So that sort of gives you an idea of Stu Peters. Like, it looks like he's just basically, again, a bit like Dr. Aris. He's tried something, he's tried something, he's tried something, and he's tried something.
Yeah, it seems to be publicity driven behind both of these personalities so far.
It certainly seems that way, doesn't it?
They're weird choices. Like, he's not the most intimidating looking guy, is he? And he's really a really tough guy kind of roles that he's taking.
Yeah. I mean, maybe that's it. Maybe he just raps at these people, like, and just take the money, like, fine. But when he's there with things saying that he's all in danger and stuff like that, the first thing that he does is he basically quotes these papers. He says that when I read these papers, I knew that the remdesivir was terrible. And the first one he shows is the NIH final report confirms remdesivir benefits for COVID-19. Now, there's nothing bad in this study at all. Again, he's just lied. He infers that the Ebola study is this study. Like, what that study shows is reduced illness, reduced time in the hospital, and reduced mortality by stopping the virus from replicating if it's used at the right time. Okay, that's what it says. Now, he gets the 50% death from a study that is called a randomized control trial of Ebola virus disease therapeutics from 2019. And the reason that this is even sort of known, Fauci's basically saying this is where remdesivir came from. Originally, we tried it as a Ebola medicine. It wasn't terribly effective. Half the people in that group died. But the study showed that the remdesivir, there was no damage to the kidneys or anything like that. It was the Ebola that killed them. The remdesivir just didn't save them, basically. He then goes on to say stuff like, remdesivir is toxic and it's the only drug that's been licensed for newborns in the country. It's like, that's not actually true anymore. There's vaccines and there's various other protocols that can now be used. So it's not the only drug that's licensed for them. But again, it really wouldn't be problematic because none of these papers that he claims show it to have toxic effects are accurate. He's simply lying, basically. 6 months and older are now eligible in the USA, which is where he's talking about, for the vaccine. So it is no longer the only treatment available for COVID for newborns. So he's just talking crap there. He then goes on to say that basically they've stopped monoclonal antibody treatments so that you have to get remdesivir. And this is true. They did stop monoclonal antibody treatments because they found that basically on Omicron and later variants, it's not effective. It simply doesn't work. And monoclonal antibody treatments are very, very expensive compared to other treatments. So they've not done it in some sinister way. Oh, this is working, best stop this. Don't you think if that was the case, that the people on the front line that were actually using it would be up in arms? Thank Christ this chiropractor has spotted something that the world's medical experts haven't. He then says that he gets the text from Dr. Richard Bartlett. Now, Richard Bartlett, he's a funny old character. Now, as we say, Richard Bartlett is the person that texted him and said that, what would you do if you got bitten by a snake? Would you go to the hospital? Now, he promotes this thing called budesonide, right? But he says that budesonide, which is a steroid that's used for asthma patients, is actually really good at preventing COVID. And he says that it can actually reduce death and hospitalization by 90%. And there's a paper that backs this up. It says it's called Inhaled Budesonide in Treatment of Early COVID-19 Illness, a randomized control title. Now, it does say 90%, but what it actually says is there were 146 participants, 76 in each group, all symptomatic with COVID for 7 days. And they split them in half. Half were treated normally, half were treated with budesonide. In the group that was treated normally, 10 were hospitalized. In the group that was treated with budesonide, only 1 was hospitalized. Hence, he extracts from that a 90% reduction in hospitalization. It's a very, very small study, and technically it does show that, But there's all sorts of other variables about it. Now, his problem is that basically he says that budesonide is like a silver bullet. He says that we don't need any other treatments, and that's simply not true. It works with some people some of the time if you get it in early enough. But you'll notice that even in that randomized control trial, one patient on budesonide went to the hospital. So it's by no means a silver bullet. If these doctors, Bartlett and Ardis, are postulating that somehow a venom is involved, enough for Dr. Bartlett to text Dr. Ardis and say, what would you do if you had rattlesnake venom inside you? Well, how the hell does that steroid work against it then? It can't be both, because that steroid will not work against snake venom. It might work against COVID, but you're contradicting one another there. Because if budesonide is a usable treatment, it can't be snake venom. If it's snake venom, budesonide will not work. So one, maybe both of these people are lying, or at the very most stretching the truth. In October of last year, Bartlett made it into the newspapers. He was given a criminal trespass warning from the Ector County Hospital District Police. He was caught on the hospital grounds going through the hospital bins. Now, what he was looking for was evidence of this theory that had been put about. Basically, there's this thing called the Odessa Accountability Project, and it had shared a picture of a 17-year-old girl who had a plastic bag on her head. And they said that basically this was humiliating and dehumanizing, and that the bag was actually just like an equipment cover, like a laptop cover, and because it was a plastic bag, this could suffocate her and this could kill her. Some have even inferred that this is how they're killing people in hospitals. They're suffocating people with plastic bags. And so he'd gone in there to look for evidence of this theory. Now, the picture is real. There's a girl there with a plastic bag on her head, and it says equipment cover on the plastic bag. And the hospital have actually apologized and said, yeah, we're terribly sorry, we really shouldn't have done that. However, the girl was on an oxygen mask, so there's no danger of her suffocating at all. And the reason that they'd put that bag over her head was because they'd run out of preventative PPE covers, which are essentially plastic bags anyway, which at the time was the protocol for helping people who were severely ill with COVID. So nothing really has gone wrong there. They've basically just hyped it up to basically give the impression that this is more of this nefarious COVID scam.
So under that bag was an oxygen mask?
Yes,
okay,
yes, and you can actually see it in the picture if you look. You can see the tube coming down and stuff like that. So it's one of these things where on the face of it, you can go, yeah, all right, I could see why putting a plastic bag on a 17-year-old girl's head doesn't seem like a good idea, but there's actually a semi-reasonable explanation for it. Anyway, Dr. Bartlett got in trouble with the hospital and the police for digging through the bins of that particular hospital at the end of last year, looking for proof that this was a thing, basically.
So what, he was like looking for plastic bags?
Yeah, apparently. I mean, how this would prove anything, like I don't actually know, but yes, this is what he was caught doing. And I don't think he got a criminal record for it. I think he got a ticking off, but he certainly didn't do any jail time or anything like that. But
they're really painting the hospitals out to be absolute horror shows, aren't they? Just hell on earth. Just plastic, every nurse, plastic bag on their head.
This is kind of their shtick, isn't it? Because to say Brian Hardy says that his father-in-law died in hospital because of hospital protocols. He doesn't. He may, but I've never heard him expand on what that actually means. But this is what started him off on his quest. It certainly wasn't that he wanted money and fame, despite his track record of doing things that indicate that he's really after money and fame. This time he was genuine. So that was it. Then basically he says that most antivenoms are monoclonal antibodies, and that's why they don't want them using monoclonal antibodies, because monoclonal antibodies are venom. And this is bollocks. Monoclonal antibodies used for COVID do not recognise or bind to snake venom. They have absolutely nothing to do with snake venom. Antivenoms are produced by injecting venom into an animal with a robust immune system, such as a horse, and harvesting the antibodies that the animal produces in response. Monoclonal antibodies are completely different. They are lab-produced or cloned and designed to boost projection against a specific target. They clone an antibody that sticks to the spike protein of COVID and neutralizes it. No monoclonal antibodies have ever been created yet to target snake venoms. And that's Dr. Robert Gary, who's a virologist at Tulane University. So where he's got this idea that monoclonal antibodies are antivenoms, I've got absolutely no idea. It's just nonsense. He just completely made it up. Later, he makes a complete nightmare of himself and sort of shows that he doesn't have the first idea what monoclonal antibodies are, but we'll come on to it. And then he goes into that's because COVID's a venom. They don't want people using monoclonal antibodies. Fact-checking is the opposite of fact-checking, etc., etc. Right. Then he comes on to the bit that sounds a bit plausible, where he basically says, was there ever anything that suggested that that snakes would be the reservoir for SARS-CoV-2? And he cites the paper Crosby's transmission of the newly identified coronavirus 2019, in which case it says that they've got codons from many banded kraits and king cobras. This is true. However, a paper by G et al. Suggests that snakes might serve as a likely reservoir for the novel COVID-2 virus, and it was recently published after accelerated review and widely circulated by the news media. The author's claim was based on the observation that the codon usage of nCoV was more similar to snakes than other potential hosts they investigated. However, this premise is incorrect. Only rarely is the codon usage of a virus mostly closely matched to that of a known reservoir host. There is no data to support that snakes would be a likely reservoir for nCoV-2. I calculated the codon usage of SARS-CoV, MERS-CoV, and EV-CoV-2 and investigated how closely matched they were to the range of different species. As it can be seen in Figure 1, that while nCoV 2019 does indeed have high CAI to several different snake species, the same is also true for both MERS-CoV and SARS-CoV-1, and they have camels and bats, respectively, as their known reservoir species. In fact, both MERS and SARS-CoV-1 sequence have higher amounts of snake codons than SARS-CoV-2, and we know that snakes are not the reservoir for that. So it basically doesn't mean anything. It indicates that there's something in there, but other more prominent and better scientists have said, yeah, okay, I get what you're looking at, I see what you're saying, but that's not indicative that that's where it came from. As you say, MERS and SARS-1 have more cobra and krait peptides, for want of a better phrase, in them than SARS-CoV-2, and we know that they didn't come from snakes. So it's almost like finding a word in a larger word or something like that. It's like, oh, there's an and in demand or whatever. Like, it doesn't mean that it's the same thing. It just means that it has a similarity. So unfortunately, that's not true. He then goes on to talk about Dr. Bing Liu, who was shot and killed, implying that basically it was because of what he found for SARS-CoV-2. And this is pretty vulture-like, to be quite honest. It's been fairly established that it was a tragic murder-suicide based on potentially like an affair or something like that. So that medical researcher, said to be on the verge of making very significant coronavirus findings, was found shot to death in late April, early May 2020. Bing Liu, 37, was shot in the head and neck. He had a PhD in computational science, and he was looking into the cellular mechanisms that underlie the COVID-19 virus. He was found dead at his home, and his wife was not present. An hour after his body was found, a second body was found in his car with a self-inflicted gunshot wound, not in Bing Liu's car, in his own car. And the gentleman was called Hao Gu, who's 46, and he knew Bing Liu, and they argued together over an intimate partner. What the nature of this argument is unknown, and it's probably best not to pry, to be quite honest. But what happened is that this gentleman murdered Bing Liu and then went down the street, sat in his car, and shot himself in the head. And this is known. So to infer that it's connected with no evidence to back it up it's a bit shitty, isn't it? Like, really, it's using somebody's death to promote your own nonsense, essentially.
Yeah, it's typical MO of conspiracy theorists, really.
I'm afraid it is. Like, it's it's a bit disrespectful if we're honest. Right, then he talks about the January 2020 study on gene mapping by Genentech, where they found 19 toxic venom proteins. Yeah, that's it. That's literally it. He's found a 19. Fucking hell. Like, when he starts looking at old like annuals and calendars and stuff like that, he's going to blow his mind. Like all the 19s in those, like there's literally nothing to tie it in. He then makes a really vague attempt to tie it in by this technique that he's become accustomed. What's it called? Lying. He lies, right? He says that, is there a connection to Gilead? Gilead who make remdesivir. And he says that, yeah, Gilead bought 2 facilities from Genentech in 2011, and then they bought 55 execs into Gilead in 2011 when the Cobra study started. Several things. They just bought 2 labs. That's all they did. They bought 2 labs. The snake study wasn't done in the same labs. It wasn't even done in the same state. Right? It was done by Genentech, who isn't the owner of the labs. The labs are now owned by Gilead, who are nothing to do with Genentech. He says that they brought 55 executives in to oversee the handover. That's a lie. It's a flat-out lie. I found the reference for it. The 55 people were lab workers that had always worked at that lab and continue to work at that lab because they work in a lab. It doesn't really matter who they're working for. They're just doing lab work. So he's lied. He's just flat out lied to try and give the impression. Now, it gets worse than that. The study was called the Indian Cobra Reference Genome and Transcriptome enables comprehensive identification of venom toxins. So the whole point of the study with the 19 of it was making it easier to identify snake venom. Wouldn't that go against a plot to secretly put venom in the water? If this study is about how to more effectively, reveal venom and to identify venom, wouldn't that be completely antithetical to what the theory is trying to actually achieve? It's almost, again, like he's just pulling disparate shit out of his arse and throwing it at the wall and hoping that nobody goes, this is bollocks. But that's essentially what it is. So he then goes on to say that hydroxychloroquine blocks the nicotine receptors of the brain from it being injured by cobra and viper venom. And he doesn't give a reference. I can't find it. I found one study, and it was called Effects of Chloroquine on the Toxicity of Mice of the Venom and Neurotoxins from the Snake Bungarus multicinctus. And it turns out that if you envenomate a mouse and you give them hydroxychloroquine, it kills them quicker. It makes it worse. Now, I don't know if that is the paper that he's referencing because I can't find any other reference. And so this idea that hydroxychloroquine is like some preventative against snake venom isn't borne out by anything that I can find. In fact, again, it seems to make it worse, right? He then says that basically that the protocol for injecting remdesivir is the same as for injecting horses with venom to get monoclonal antibodies. Now, if you'll excuse the pun, he's had a fucking mare there, because you don't inject horses to get monoclonal antibodies. You get them to get antibodies for antivenom. You get monoclonal antibodies in a lab setting. So he's just completely confused the two. Also, the protocol for injecting anything into anyone, there's 2 types, one intravenously and one intramuscularly. So the protocol is almost bound to be the same for literally anything that requires you to inject something. So again, that's just a very, very dishonest framing of it. Okay. Then he goes on to the study, like venom coursing through the bodies. Researchers identify the mechanism driving COVID-19 mortality, and he says it basically boils down to this enzyme. If you remember, he was saying that this SPLAZ11A enzyme is found in elevated levels in people that have COVID, and it's also found in rattlesnake venom. Now, there is a key thing that he misses here. The enzyme is found in everybody. Everybody. It's a naturally occurring enzyme. Now, the elevated levels are unusual, but it's not that it indicates that snake venom's there. It indicates that snake venom uses the same mechanism. This enzyme is your body's response to a pathogen, in this case, COVID-19. And so the enzyme is indicative of something's going wrong in your body. Your body's kind of attacking itself, and that is how COVID gets to sort of cause damage, essentially. Now, the authors of this study have just basically said this is nonsense. He's completely misrepresented it. It doesn't indicate that there's snake venom at all. It's like saying that man's bleeding. I saw a man bleeding when he got bitten by a lion. Hence, everybody that bleeds must be bitten by a lion. There's no logic to it. The SPLA211A enzyme, which has similarities to an active enzyme in rattlesnake venom, is found in low concentrations in healthy individuals and has long been known to play a critical role in defense against bacterial infections, destroying microbial cell membranes. So it's a part of your defense mechanisms. And what's happening is COVID causes a cytokine response, which is essentially your immune system attacking itself. So it's producing too much of this enzyme, and that starts to become detrimental. It doesn't mean that there's rattlesnake venom in there. And again, I'll reiterate, we've gone through crate, cobra, rattlesnake. I think at one point he touches on viper venom. These are all different snakes with different venoms that have different effects and attack the body in different ways. And we'll further reiterate, they're all venoms. They need to go into your bloodstream. Drinking it wouldn't actually do any harm at all in a lot of cases. Sure, there's going to be some cases that are unlucky, but basically that's not how it actually works. He then basically says, I'm convinced that COVID-19 is not a respiratory virus of any kind. It's actually venom poison. I believe they synthesized this using proteins and peptides from venoms of snakes, and now they're administering it to certain people. Well, aside from the fact that there's dozens and thousands, in fact, of papers showing A, the isolation of SARS-CoV-2, and B, the infecting of macaque monkeys and the passing it through one monkey to another, fulfilling Rivers and Cox postulates and all of this stuff. You can find this very, very easily on the internet. It's been done. Like, I know people, we know people. Swale Mutton's isolated it in the lab work that he's done. Like, it's not an uncommon thing. And so all these people who are saying this nonsense about, oh, it's not been isolated or it's not been isolated properly and stuff like that, you just don't know what you're talking about. Like, you need to sort of, you can't just say that. You need to rebut the evidence. Nobody has, other than saying nonsense about, once it's got the kidneys in, you're picking up the monkey kidneys, aren't you? It's like, do you have any concept of how DNA tests work? Like, evidently not. Like, if you can pull somebody's DNA off another person's corpse that's been stuffed in a mattress under a bed for 20 years, I'm pretty sure these people know how to distinguish between, the cell culture and the virus. Like, of course they do. Was it there before? No. Then it's something new. Was it there before? Yeah. Oh, well, that's the monkey kidneys then. Like, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous, basically. Also, he doesn't say who or why. I mean, he obviously goes into this slightly later, but at the minute he's just leaving us as dangling. Right. Vaccines have magnetic material in them. No, they bloody don't. Like, I mean, he's already made a point of saying that the vaccines have got a colour that's similar to snake venom. Like, that graphene oxide is black. It's black. It's a black powder. It's like graphene or anything like that. It's not dissimilar from pencil shavings. So you would notice it. Again, he's contradicted himself. Either it's black or it's white and yellow. Which is it? It can't be both. And all those people saying, oh, magnets are sticking to my arm because of it. Like, I don't wish to be rude, but have a wash. Have a wash. What's happening there is it's called adhesion. It's the moisture on your skin is sticking it to it. It's not uncommon. Like, it can be done. The very fact that you've shown it happening, it's happened to me and I haven't even been vaccinated. Right, well, let's extrapolate that and see where we go to that. But it's bullshit. It's absolute nonsense. He then talks about Operation Mockingbird. Right. So his theory that proves that this is a thing is a television show in which somebody was poisoned with a drink and the poison was derived from snakes.
Yeah. Okay.
Really?
That's enough.
Right. I mean, that's up there with V, isn't it? Yeah. Like, V is indicative of and Conan the Barbarian. Exactly. Like, isn't that backwards? Isn't that, like, I mean, it's nonsense. It's absolutely nonsense. I mean, like, for the record, the person that produced that particular show has said, no, don't be stupid. I've got nothing to do with the plot to envenomate the entire planet and disguise it as an airborne pathogen. So just to to cover that. So again, that's filler, really, isn't it? I kind of get what he's saying, because he's kind of tying it with this the 9/11 thing, the lone gunman stuff, where it's like, oh, nobody's ever envisaged this, and then there's an episode where basically that plot point seems to be happening, where terrorists are going to crash it into the thing. But people get sort of het up on that. That doesn't indicate that particular film network knew what was going to happen on 9/11. It just says that somebody had thought of the idea of crashing a plane into a building before. So the significance of that is greatly overstated by artists in this. I don't think it is significant. I don't think there's any at all. Certainly when he says that this is proof that it was planned all along. Peptides from crate venom. Oh, we're back to crates now. I realise that this has been how they're spreading this. Now, when he shows the COVID test being put under a water tap and it gives a positive reading, that's not saying that the water's got COVID. You've broken the test. Like, this is a thing that kids picked up on pretty quickly, that those LFTs, like all tests, like there's a way to game them, to break them. And in this particular case, if you put stuff that had a lot of sugar in, or you put basically just saturated them, you would destroy the testing pad, which is a bit like a sort of litmus test, and you'd just knacker it out and it would just give both readings, so indicating that it's a positive test. And this is how they tested a pawpaw fruit and a goat positive for COVID, by breaking an LFT. That doesn't mean that the tests don't work, right? Okay, if I can break a test that indicates that I'm pregnant, say, by fucking about with it till it gives the two blue lines or whatever, that doesn't mean that the tests don't work. It means that I've broken the test. Like, that's all it means. Like, you know, it's really as simple as that. And again, people try to make a lot more out of that than it actually is. But this is where he basically starts saying that it's in the water. And one of his sort of main bits of evidence, which he repeats a lot, is that, isn't it weird that the CDC does wastewater testing for COVID, right? And then that's an indication of where there's going to be an outbreak. He says that's backwards. He also says that if it's in the water, it's passed through you, so you won't have COVID anymore, so there's no way that you can have symptoms. Now, both of these things are lies. He's just lying. What he's missed there is the incubation period. Rises in SARS-CoV-2 in the water supply, the wastewater, indicates that there's going to be a spike, because usually it can take up to 14 days for symptoms to develop. So this is the asymptomatic phase. Sometimes people get straight away, but for a long time, some people basically don't realise that they've got COVID. Some people never realise that they've got COVID. There's a group of lads in the village that I work in, that I live in, and they went on a pub crawl. On the Sunday, one of them tested positive for COVID. By the Sunday afternoon, all of them have tested positive for COVID. 2 weeks later, the landlord of one of the pubs died from COVID. None of the lads, the students, ever got ill. But the strong indication is that they've asymptomatically given it to this poor sod who, because he was elderly or more elderly, it affected him far greater, and sadly he died. So, you know, all this asymptomatic is not a thing. There are very simple ways to test it. I know this girl, right? She's got HIV, and she's a fairly liberated type of person. I'm sure we could arrange to do some sort of experiment. You know, you could put your money where your mouth is and see if you come out of it better or worse. And then see if we think that asymptomatic is a thing. I mean, you could always just basically look at Typhoid Mary, the most famous case of asymptomatic spread in the world, where this poor woman gave typhoid to numerous people, never got ill herself, and she worked as a servant in various houses, and so just went from house to house, spreading it and killing lots of people, sadly. So that's how it's not backwards, because it takes time for the incubation period. So when they see it in the wastewater, that means that people are just going to start to get ill. So it's just absolutely nonsense. Then he goes to say that basically, the water companies aren't in this, but they are using the water systems to target specific demographics. They're absolutely confident that this peptide will kill everybody, blah, 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 blah. Now, this is logistically impossible, right? Okay, I had a quick look into it just to see sort of how many, because he says that these water companies are not in on it. So you'd have to trick, bribe, or get past all of these people. In the UK, there's 12 water and sewage companies and 13 that just deal with water. So, you know, there's over 20 different companies, all who are private industries, all that basically have their own protocols, own compliance, own regulatory authorities. You'd have to get past all of those in the UK in order to put the venom in the water. Do you know how many there are in America? Have a guess. How many water companies that you'd have to bypass in order to make this a thing? How many do you think there are in America?
20 in the UK, I guess 100 maybe, more?
Ooh, close.
200 maybe?
Closer.
UK is about the size of California.
Yeah.
So there's 50 states.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's 50,000 in America. And as well as the 50,000 water boards, there are 3 levels of regional, state, and federal regulatory authority. So you'd have to get past every single one of those in order to make this plot work, right? There's been 94 million cases in America and over 1 million deaths over 2 years, right? Okay. Now, if one bite from cobra venom could kill about 11 people, so for 94 million cases, you'd need over 8.5 million cobra milkings. But you need to do it every day. You'd need to do it every single day continuously because it only goes through the water system once. So it's completely logistically impossible. It's just ridiculous. Like, to suggest such a thing is just, it's asinine, really. It's just completely nonsense. It then goes on to basically say that smokers aren't affected by COVID because of the nicotine receptors, meaning that snake venom is ineffective against smokers because nicotine covers the receptor. This is bullshit. Like, we would notice if smoking was a cure for snaking. If that was the case, why aren't all these snake handlers, they're Christian guys and stuff like that, why don't they smoke? Why don't they tell people in rural India, smoke for Christ's sake if you're ever out in places where snakes might be? Because it'll prevent you from getting ill. Do you know why they don't do that? Because it's absolute nonsense. In fact, it's worse than that. Initially, there in June 2020 and March 2020, a nicotinic hypothesis for COVID-19 with preventative and therapeutic implications. And in March 2020, active smoking is not associated with severity of COVID-19. This was pretty much just as the peak started. So the data taken there is incomplete at best. Now, recently, the World Health Organization did a population study with a symptom app in over 2.4 million people. So much more than these tiny studies. And this study of 2.4 million users entering the data into the Zoe COVID-19 study in the months from the 24th of March 2020, smokers were far more likely to report the classic triad of symptoms suggesting COVID-19, cough, fever, breathlessness, and also more likely to report more symptoms, a surrogate for disease severity. And a review by the World Health Organization found that smoking is associated with more severe illness and increased risk of death in people who have COVID-19. So not only is he wrong, he's bang wrong. He's completely wrong. And I'll reiterate that that's bullshit. Like, just the idea that smoking would stop you from like getting hurt with a venomous snake. Go on then, Dr. Ardis. This is the challenge I lay down to you. Smoke them up, Johnny, and then show me that works. I want to see that. I want to see you in there naked with a load of snakes, like with nicotine yellow fingers, right? Just going, it's nothing, I don't care, right? And if you don't, you're a liar.
Just patches all over his body.
Exactly. If he doesn't, he's a liar and a charlatan. So, on to the virus in Latin means venom. What's the best way to put this? No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't at all. No, it really doesn't. Like, and all this, like, the definition means Pope's venom pandemic or King Cobra venom pandemic. No, just no. I don't even know when he's doing that, where he gets the cobra from. Stu Peters goes, cobra? Like he's like had some massive revelation. Like, it could be anything. There's lots of king things. King flip. Like, King flip, King flip venom pandemic. Like, it's just bullshit. It's just absolute nonsense. And he's trying to sort of tie it in with this. This is where he gets onto this religious aspect of it. And again, for just apropos of nothing, he does two things. Well, he does several things. One, he basically tells you that that you shouldn't take medicine, that you should pray it away. And two, he basically suggests that the Catholic Church is behind this worldwide plot to bypass the water companies. It's somehow connected to vaccines, treatment protocols, and the World Health Organization, and their plot is to put venom in the water.
Can I just say as well, as a Christian, please don't listen to his advice. Take your medicine and then pray. Sorry, this shit pisses me off. It's bearing false witness.
Yeah.
Is exactly what you're not supposed to be doing. And for you to sit there and say that God has pressed it on you, God has pushed you forward to go and tell these people basically nonsense, basically absolutely point blank lies, which Neil has pointed out.
Yeah.
This guy, if you're a Christian or whatever, this guy is evil. If you're a believer of anything, this guy is the charlatan. He's a false prophet. This is, when people use religion to sell them some shit, it's one of the lowest forms of manipulating people. And conspiracists are the same, really. They do the same thing. And so when you mix conspiracies and religion together, it just becomes very manipulative and something that really does wind me the hell up.
I can imagine. Yeah.
No, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. I think it's despicable that they would use a hook like that to draw people in. He's using Christianity and faith in the most manipulative way.
He is.
To he's goading people almost. Basically, what he's essentially saying is, you're not as Christian as me if you do something as silly as take medicine.
Yeah,
which is nonsense. It's nonsense. It's despicable.
And you're going to go to hell if you do.
Yeah, pretty much is what he's saying. And then all this stuff about DNA and mRNA and just nonsense. The last thing that he says, you're saying that mRNA that he implies is used in the vaccines is taken from king cobras, and he cites this paper called Moderna co-founders using mRNA tech to treat venomous snake bites. It's not. It's nothing to do with the mRNA vaccines that are to do with COVID. It's about the delivery system. Again, this is a paper which discusses how mRNA technology works and how in the future, hopefully, they might be able to use that in the production of antivenoms and therefore not have to kill quite so many horses. It doesn't exist yet. It's not a real thing, but they're hoping that technology, which we must all remember is new tech or relatively new tech, might be useful for all sorts of other things. But they're finding that for lots of stuff. I think recently they were saying that the mRNA delivery system might be useful for certain types of cancer and various other sort of illnesses and situations. So it's just a big pile of absolute nothing. So then he starts in his backtracking mode. He then goes on to the Steel Truth to basically talk about the fact that it's in the water. It's definitely in the water, but you don't need to panic, because he didn't want people to panic that it's in the water, but it definitely is in the water. And again, one of the most stupid things that is an issue there is this Kelly Kingston or whoever it is. She texts him. She says, "Oh my God, I'm going through the patents for all the COVID vaccines, and all of them have that enzyme in them." And she's talking about the SPLA2 enzyme that's found in rattlesnake venom. Now, there's a flaw in this particular piece of evidence, in as much as it's a lie. It's not true. I checked, you checked, we put it out on Twitter. I didn't know. I thought maybe it is. Maybe it's got a different name, different clinical name or whatever. Thank you to everybody that helped us on Twitter. We put that out there. We put out the list of things. It's just not there. It isn't there. Some people even pointed out to us very helpfully, well, that wouldn't be there. That's an enzyme that occurs naturally in people's bodies, blah, 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 etc. They saw through this nonsense completely. So Brian Ardis and whoever this Kelly Kingston woman is, they've lied. They've just simply lied. They've absolutely 100% lied. They've just made this up out of whole cloth to try and make it so this theory is plausible. Then he says that basically some patents for adenovirus vaccines also have venom in them during the manufacture, which seems to sort of support what he's saying about this enzyme being in all the vaccines, even though it's not. And basically, in some potential antivenoms, there is one preprint paper that mentions venom as a cure for COVID, but it just doesn't pass peer review. And it's the same thing. It's basically saying, oh, look, if this is how snake venoms trick the body into reacting, can we use that same mechanism in order to treat other things by essentially, tricking the body? But that's what you're doing with all vaccines. You're tricking the body into thinking that you've got a disease so that it can fight it, but it's fighting a safe or a lesser virulent strain of it, or a lesser virulent dose of it, for example. So again, this isn't new. It's just nonsense. And then they say the ridiculous thing that, this makes perfect sense. This is why children are not getting COVID, because children have got more melatonin. And again, immediately when I watched this, I was like, well, that would mean that children would be immune to snake bites. Are children immune to snake bites? Let's look that up. No. In fact, they'll die quicker from snake bites, regardless of the amount of melatonin in their body. So again, it's just bullshit. They've just made it up. And saying stuff like that is dangerous as well, because, as I say, what that implies is that, your kid's going to be fine from COVID, which is not necessarily the case. Children do die. Children do get long COVID. Children do get hepatitis from the effects of COVID infection. So it's much better to have your kid not have that disease than to have it. And again, just to extrapolate that would mean that you could stick your children in with venomous snakes and they'll be fine all day. And that's just simply not the case. And if that's not the case, then there's no logic to the argument. It's just nonsense. But then he goes on again. He just basically keeps saying that, how can I prove it's in the water? Because they're testing the water. They keep testing the water. He then basically this is where it gets all very strange. He keeps reiterating that the CDC are testing it in the water, but that Stu Peters misrepresented him by saying that it's in the water, but then he keeps repeating that it is in the water, but that's not the important thing, that it's in the water, but it definitely is in the water. He is, to use a phrase that I'm particularly fond of, all over the place like a crazy woman shit at this point. He just can't hang it together at all. Now, if I was a suspicious man, what I'd suggest was that he said this thing, not expected people to go, but that's stupid, Dr. Ardis. And then when he has realised that, he's just lying and he's using the technique that you would use at school when you're trying to impress a group of people, but you realise you're wrong and this other person is right. You keep talking loud and fast and repeating the same phrases over and over again so that Chappie here doesn't get a say, so that the impression is that you've given something. So just keep hammering that he does the CDC, the water, the CDC, the water. What he's trying to do is he's trying to paint a picture that just isn't there. It is, again, the guy calls him out for it, basically. He says he wouldn't be able to do it. You wouldn't be able to sneak past all these heavily guarded places. And then he shows the tiniest bit of humility by saying, basically, oh no, I don't know anything about it. Maybe these guys know more about it. Before immediately going back to saying, but it's still in the water. I still believe it's in the water. And the proof of it is in the water is that they're PCR testing the water. Now, there is, again, a bit of a contradiction in terms with this. You can't PCR test for venom. You can't. So if they are PCR testing the water, they can't be finding venom there. They must be finding something else. So his own sort of proof doesn't work. It doesn't work even on the most basic level. Yeah, he then basically just doubles down on everything. So we don't know where it is. Maybe it's in the air, maybe it's in the water. But I think that it would be harder to spread in the air. And it's well, it would be harder to spread in the air if it was venom, yes, unless you sort of went by flinging it at people. But again, you've come from it from the position of it's definitely venom. Let's try and prove how it's venom. And bizarrely, again, the person who tipped to him that it was venom is Richard Bartlett, who wants to treat it with a steroid, which can't be used against venom, and doesn't think that it's in the water. So, I don't know where to go with this. It's just ridiculous. Oh, that was the other thing that we missed off. Sorry, just to go back to the watch the water. He says that what convinced him, and what convinced Stu Peters as well, was that they looked at the list of symptoms for snake bite, and they looked at the symptoms from COVID from the CDC, and they were, in their words, identical.
Let me guess.
Well, let's have a look at the CDC symptoms for snakebite. And anyone can find this, so just Google it. Puncture marks around the wound, redness, swelling, bruising, bleeding, or blisters around the bite site, severe pain at the site of the bite, nausea, vomiting, or diarrhea, laboured breathing, rapid heart rate, or a weak pulse or low blood pressure, disturbed vision, metallic, mint, or rubber taste in mouth, increased salivation, increased sweating, numbness or tingling around the face and limbs, and muscular twitching. Right, so there's two out of that I could see that might match COVID, which is basically laboured breathing and nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea.
And sweating for fever.
Yeah. So the COVID symptoms are fever or chills, as you say, cough, shortness of breath, fatigue, muscle or body aches, which may be, but like it's very, very different to being bitten by a snake. Loss of taste of smell, which is the opposite because you get a metallic taste in a snake bite, a sore throat, congestion or runny nose, nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. So there's nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, maybe sweating and shortness of breath, but it's by no means identical, is it?
No. So out of say 25 symptoms, it shares 3.
3.5 maybe. It's not
Same thing.
Yeah, exactly the same thing. It's not quite there, is it, basically? But yeah, and it reiterates that with this woman and the things, every aspect of COVID, the neurological, the coagulative impacts, it's all identical to snake venom. And then the woman whose name escapes me says, and the suppression of your breathing, your diaphragm, your inability to have a full breath, which I experienced. So she's saying that, it very much felt like my diaphragm was being paralyzed as opposed to just having shortness of breath. And it's like, come on, like whatever. Right, so he's on Mike Adams now, finally, in order to dispel the myths that he's already dispelled or failed to dispel. And again, he keeps going on about how it's not in the water and that he doesn't want anybody to panic, but it's definitely in the water. And Mike agrees with him that it's in the water and the testing in the water, so it's definitely in the water. But don't panic about that, but be vigilant because it's in the water. So he does actually say, basically, water has not been my story, even though it definitely has. Water has not been my story. That's not the biggest part of my story. It is. I've been repeating, whatever the bioweapon is, that it's not very good because it has a 99.97% survival rate. That's not what he's been saying. It's been saying that it will alter your DNA to put Satan inside of you, and it's a plot by the Catholic Church. He's also said that 30% of people that have this snake venom will die. Where's he got this 99.97? I'll tell you where he's got this 99.97. It's a trope that's flown around by COVID people. There's a visual that's supposedly from the CDC that says survival rate is 99.7. Do you know what's wrong with that? It's not from the CDC. Somebody's just mocked that up. The CDC has never, ever given a survival rate for COVID because they don't give survival rates. They give IFRs or CFRs. IFR is an incident fatality rate, which is your likelihood to catch it and then die. Case fatality rate is if you catch it, what percentage of people will die. And the case fatality rate has been between 2 and 7% all over the world, depending on access to medicines, hospitals being overwhelmed, infrastructure, that type of thing. So where did this 99.97 thing come from? It came from a working paper that came out in early 2020, which was called the Centre for Global Development Working Paper. It was in June 2020. And what it was saying, we haven't got a lot of COVID here, but we're going to hypothesize scenarios in which we say how likely people are to catch it, and if they do catch it, how likely they are to die. And in this one scenario, what they did was they said that we will completely quarantine one town. And if we quarantine that town, we suspect that your chances of catching it and then going on to die are less than 1%. So they said that the IFR for this hypothetical town in which they completely closed it off to the outside world, that the survival rate, if you want to use that word, which is incorrect, is 99.97%. It was a hypothetical paper based on a made-up scenario with a fictionalized town and a projection based on what they knew at the time, which turned out to be wrong. So that 99.97 is a complete misnomer. It's, again, another COVID trope that's been trotted out. It's still trotted out, and it's not true. And the source of this makes it clear that this isn't true. But again, people will use it because it suits their cause. It suits the narrative that they want to project rather than actually adhering to facts. He then basically says, even if the water is the source, I never thought it was dangerous. I never thought it was horrific, demonizing it, saying, look at the water. He literally did, though, didn't he? He said literally that it will turn you into Satan, which, as we've mentioned before, I think that's demonization. They then go on to a bit about fluoride, which is interesting because there's arguments about fluoride. Like the concept that basically like fluoride was used by the Nazis and the communists and gulags to dull people's rebellious natures and stuff like that. There's no source for it. There's literally no source for it. There's a book called The Case Against I.G. Farben, which claims that this is the case, but there's actually no documentary evidence, no primary source for that. It appears to have just come into existence. Is fluoride good for you or bad for your teeth? It's debated, to be quite honest. People have found that actually in high doses it can cause damage to bones and damage to teeth. What dose that is, if I'm honest, I don't know. But to infer that they're poisoning people with fluoride is just silly. And again, it's one of these sort of truth tropes that actually, when you look at it, it doesn't have as much grounding as you may initially think. Right. He doubles down again on the water. He absolutely doubles down completely again on the water. And he says, yeah, well, but they're going to filter that wastewater and then it's going to become your source water. I don't see anything that the CDC has shown to me that they aren't only testing the water for SARS-CoV-2, this really deadly pathogen, but then at the same time they're filtering out of your water before they give it back to you. I've never seen that. Well, there's a reason that he's never seen that, and it's because he's never bothered to look for it. But I did. Now, in fairness to him, it isn't actually the CDC, because the CDC isn't responsible for the water in America. It's the EPA, or the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, if you're a fan of the Simpsons film. So I had a look there, and it's like, is there anything to indicate that they might be taking this seriously? Well, there's a web page called Coronavirus and Drinking Water and Wastewater, and it says there is no higher priority for the EPA than protecting the health and safety of Americans. EPA is providing this important information about COVID-19 as it relates to drinking water and wastewater to provide clarity to the public. The COVID virus has never been detected in drinking water supplies. Based on current evidence, the risk to water supplies is low. Do wastewater treatment plants treat COVID-19? Remember, this is the thing that you couldn't find? Yes. Wastewater treatment plants treat viruses and other pathogens. Coronavirus, which causes COVID-19, is a type of virus that is particularly susceptible to disinfection. What is the EPA's role in ensuring that drinking water remains safe? The EPA has established regulations with treatment requirements for public water systems that prevent waterborne pathogens such as viruses from contaminating drinking water. These treatment requirements include filtration and disinfectants such as chlorine that remove or kill pathogens before they reach the tap. Additionally, the World Health Organization notes that conventional centralized water treatment methods, which utilize filtration and disinfection, inactivate the COVID-19 virus. So that thing that Brian Ardis couldn't find, that is essentially the crux to his theory, once he's realized that it's a logistically impossible theory, yeah, it's available on the internet for anybody to find, and we'll put a link to it in our Twitter notes. So yeah, so he's just lied. The final thing that he mentions is the British Medical Journal Global Health website, and it says it's published this paper that says there are two health crises in the world, snake bites and COVID-19. Two crises, but they have one research development in common. There is only one research and development opportunity to handle both. Do you want to know why? Because COVID is venom. This is what he says. It's not a research paper. I found this paper. It's not a research paper, it's a commentary paper. What it says is that hey, you notice when the whole world came together and funneled huge amounts of money into looking for COVID vaccines, and how basically because we had a huge amount of volunteers and a huge amount of money, and we'd not had to go through the sort of process of trying to sell it to a company and trying to get funding, which is the real reason that processing of vaccines takes up to a decade, we were able to get on with the testing and the 3-phase trials and the animal trials really, really quickly, and we were able to basically accelerate that vaccine. People have looked at this the wrong way. They've said that basically the fact that the COVID vaccine came out within a couple of years shows that they've rushed the procedure. It doesn't show that at all. It shows that actually medical research is hampered by sponsorship. That once you throw money at stuff, you can get it done. But most things, unless there's a financial incentive, they just won't finance the research.
Absolutely.
And so loads and loads of medicines that are actually really, really helpful are just sat there in what could be called production hell, because basically nobody's got the funding. And so what this paper is saying is that this gives us an opportunity. The summary, I'll read the summary. Despite inherent differences, snakebite envenomating and COVID-19 have much in common in terms of research and development challenges and opportunities. Both crises require a diverse portfolio of research and development solutions, ranging from diagnostics to treatments that can be effectively work and be accessible in different resource settings. Collaborative clinical research and streamlined regulatory pathways are critical to accelerate these candidates in the research and development pipeline. So this is all they're saying, if we throw a lot of money and effort at this thing, it can get done quicker. Transformative progress is possible with a concerted approach that aligns strong political will, coordinated financing, and the roots of most marginalised communities. And it says that basically anti-venom production at the minute is antiquated, and it would really, really benefit from an input of cash into research and development. And that's all it's saying. And he's basically tried to infer that it's both the same thing. And then he finally doubles down by saying, oh, you think I'm crazy? Well, this drug, lisinopril, is a heart medicine, and it's made from snake venom. So if you're taking that, you're literally drinking snake venom. I believe he uses the phrase pure snake venom. Can you believe that he's used that tactic again? The lying tactic, because it isn't basically like what it is it's an analog of a peptide. What an analog means is it's a synthetic copy of one part of an ingredient in the venom of Brazilian vipers. It's not actually taken from the venom. There's one bit of it, and they've copied it, making an analog again because of the effects that it has. If we're looking at things like, say, slowing the heart down and stuff like that, well, if you're having a heart attack or palpitations, something that elicits a slowing response could be very useful. I don't know if it's exactly how it is, but that's the sort of the thinking behind these things. So that basically covers watch the water. So I think we can pretty much safely say that it's nonsense. It wouldn't work in the water. It would be logistically impossible to work in the water. There's no actual evidence that it's in the water. What he said about all the papers is a lie. What he said about remdesivir is a lie. What he said about the Catholic Church and Satan is fanciful at best, stupid at worst. And everything that he said is either a lie, a willful misrepresentation, or he's just doubling down on something ridiculous in order to not admit that his previous statement was a lie. The man's a charlatan and a fraud.
Bloody hell. That was so bloody thorough. And just makes me realize how much more insane that film actually is. Because that's the tactic, though, isn't it? It's I kind of feel like that film is such it's kind of just an exaggerated example of more or less like the entire COVID debate. Just all these people without the correct qualifications throwing just papers and citing studies and all this kinds of stuff, and it's just homework. It's just dense homework that you have to trudge through. And then when you do, you're like, no, that was actually completely misrepresented, and that is not honest, and that is a stretch. And this just makes it slightly more easy because they're talking about Satan and snake venom.
Would you call him a snake venom salesman?
Oh, very good. I'd go for that. And again, I think that it's obvious why he's doing this. A, he wants to be popular, B, he wants people to tell him he's absolutely brilliant, right, okay, and C, he wants to drive people towards his website where he can buy his overpriced and unregulated products. It's just really obvious. Like, it's a grift. It's a really, really apparent grift. And the thing that really gets on my nerves about Brian Ardis is after watching him for about 5 seconds, you realise that he knows he's lying. He knows he's lying because of the way that he, as we've just gone through, the things that he'll use stats, he'll gift gallop, he'll misrepresent papers, and he's not a stupid man. If I, right, with no medical background, can read these papers and go, oh, he's lying. Oh, I see where he's got that 23% from. Oh, I see what he's trying to say here. If I can see that, he can see that. And the fact that when he's even been pointed out that this is nonsense, that he keeps doubling down and saying it's in the water, it's in the water, it's in the water. And the crux of it is that basically they're testing the water, and then he sort of takes it even further and says, well, did they do anything to make sure that the water is safe before it goes back into the drinking water? Yes, they do. That's always been a thing. Like, that's why there's not lumps of piss and shit in your drinking water, right? What was the man thinking? Like, seriously, what is he thinking?